Blessings, good evening. Today there's some questions have come in, so do our best to answer them for you. Dear Lumpur, thank you for your teachings and I wish you well. Can you kindly advise us on what are the right ways to view separation wisely? How do we develop the skills needed to view separation as something that is inevitable? I've spent almost my whole life owning so much. Sooner or later, the possession and people whom I've claimed ownership of will be separated from me one way or another. I hope to seek your guidance. Well, you're probably familiar, one of those chants we do regularly, the 5 frequent recollections. So I'm the nature to sicken, age, die. I'm the owner of my karma, but also everything that I love and like, that is pleasing to me, I'll become separated from. Like you say, it's inevitable. So that's our first aid in dealing with this problem of separation, is that you have to keep reminding yourself that everything is impermanent. Your life is impermanent, your body is impermanent, all your thoughts and feelings and moods are impermanent, and the people you love and like are impermanent, they won't be here forever. And the things you love and like, possessions and houses and places and people, everything is impermanent. So the Buddha encouraged us to frequently recollect that, so we become familiar with the theme of impermanence in our experience. And as you develop meditation, mindfulness and insight, you're kind of focusing on the impermanence of physical form, what we call rupa, and mental qualities, what we call nama. They're constantly changing, arising, ceasing according to causes and conditions. So as you know, you can have one mood one moment and another mood another moment. Memories are coming and going, thoughts arising, passing away, feelings, mental feelings, pleasure and pain, and physical feelings coming and going. So we're actually observing, if we're mindful, you can observe separation all the time. Like, in terms of people, you're not with the people you love and like all the time. Just in any one day you separate from your parents, partner, children, siblings, friends, work colleagues, neighbours. We're not with anyone all the time. So separation is going on. It's just because of attachment and delusion, we assume, well, the person I'm separating from, I'll see them again later. And depending on how attached you are to them, or what kind of attachment you have for them, whether it's you're in love with them, say romantic love, or you're just friends, or good friends, or distant acquaintances. Depends on the kind of attachment to people, how you feel about that. But you separate, but with the hope of coming back to meet again. So then you don't see the suffering so much of separation. Unless you're really in love with someone where you're always longing for them, obsessed with them, if that's happening. But we should reflect more deeply, shouldn't we? That everyone gets older, we get sick, and one day we've got to die. So whoever you love and like in this world, you will definitely separate from them. You won't be with them forever. And you have to get familiar with that idea. So seeing separation in your moment-to-moment experience, the body and mind change from moment to moment, but also reflect in a more deeper way that just the nature of existence, human existence, is bound to end up in separation. It has to be that way. But it's a relief when you see it. It's not like it's depressing. It may seem depressing at first, but actually when you really see with mindfulness and insight, it's a relief because your mind is recognizing the truth. Your thinking becomes in line with the truth, with the Dhamma, and the Dhamma makes you cool. When you see the truth, know the truth, your mind becomes cool. And in terms of separation, well, if you know you must separate from your loved ones, makes you appreciate them all the more while you have them, and try to develop good, strong relationships, forgive each other while you're together, because one day you won't have that chance, and enjoy your time together because you won't be there, they won't be there, or you won't be there forever. And contemplating separation, you can still enjoy things and appreciate the good in yourself and others and the good things you have, but you just know they won't last. Sometimes when we forget this, we have fear and anxiety of separation, so then you want to try and get every moment of pleasure out of something because you know it won't last. That's probably the wrong attitude, because it feeds attachment, and that feeds more suffering when the separation comes. When you're mindful of the impermanent nature of physical and mental phenomena, there's an ease of mind. Your mind is at ease because you know things come and go, things arise, pass away. You can accept that truth. You can be peaceful with that truth when you're mindful. That's what you're aiming for in practice, is to be mindful of impermanence, the unsatisfactory nature of things because they don't last, and you're mindful of not self, because you can't own everything really. You say you own things and then you suffer but through separation, but really we don't own anything anyway. So we should investigate that regularly through our life, and this helps to bring a lightness of mind. You realize you don't have to cling on to everything, you can let go. So the aim of Dhamma practice is to reflect on the truth, bring your mind to see and know the truth, and that frees the mind up from suffering. So you get a coolness, a peace, a lightness of mind. Another question. Ajahn, could you elaborate? Buddhist teachings liken parents to Brahma gods who provide their children with the first taste of unconditional love. Could you elaborate on this? And who are the Brahma gods in this context? Well, in the Buddhist teachings and Buddhist culture, sometimes we borrow terms from the broader culture surrounding us as Buddhists, and the Buddha did this, I believe. So he would refer to terms like Brahma gods, and so we get this comparison of parents with Brahma gods. And Brahma gods are beings who have a very pure, well-developed mind, usually from practicing meditation. Humans develop states of jhana, and particularly based on one or more of the four Brahma Viharas: metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. Kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And these are all meditation objects that, when developed to a point of one-pointedness, they develop deep states of concentration. Jhana, up to fourth jhana, say for upekkha, equanimity, one can develop to fourth jhana. Indeed, other meditation objects can also be used to develop these states of Brahma Vihara, such as the breath. And the idea is, if a being practicing hasn't yet attained Nibbana, they may have attained jhana in this life. Well, when they die, they may be reborn in a Brahma realm and become a Brahma god. One of the four Rupa Brahma realms, or one of the four Arupa, formless Brahma realms. But then taking the term Brahma, God, and using it for the pure love of a parent for their newborn baby. A child being brought up is receiving these four qualities very naturally from the parent. There's an automatic love, compassion, joy. So when the kid is sick and they recover, there's a joy, or the kid wins their first running race at school or achieves something in some way, there's a happiness of mudita. And then there's also equanimity, because your kid has ups and downs, pleasure and pain that you can't always control or stop. They may be ill or in pain or injured, and you can't stop them. You have to accept that it's their karma. So you have developed equanimity. So parents have a big store of these four Brahma Viharas quite naturally. Becoming a parent draws these qualities out. People who, when single, unmarried or without children, often feel inadequate or weak or untested or inexperienced in life. Then they marry or they have kids. Suddenly a lot of good qualities come out, because looking after, being responsible for a kid draws out these good qualities quite naturally. So they become like Brahma gods. And parents get up at all times of the day and night to feed and look after their kids, and they do always go that extra length to provide safety, happiness, security, education, medical help, food, etc. for their kids. So parents become like Brahma gods when they have kids under their care. There's a certain pure automatic love, we say unconditional love. Of course, the parents are not always like Brahma gods, and they still have their mental defilements and their weaknesses and faults. But we don't dwell on that too much. We dwell more on the positive aspects of a parent looking after their kid. And even you notice this in the animal kingdom, birds, animals, there's a certain pure love and protective nature of parents towards their offspring. Anyway, is a very good symbol for the pure love of mum and dad, is like a Brahma god. But that's not for mum and dad to become complacent. Oh, I'm a Brahma god and my kids should worship me. Mum and dad still have to do their practice, train themselves to give up greed, anger and delusion, like a true Brahma god, somebody who's attained jhana, samadhi. But nevertheless, it's a very useful reflection as you bring up your kids. And indeed, somebody may develop their spiritual qualities beyond the family and become proficient in samadhi as a Dhamma practitioner, a student of the Buddha, and they may be a parent or they may not. And they may develop one-pointedness of mind and develop metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha in their meditation, in their Dhamma practice. So they have an equal development of, say, kindness, loving kindness towards all beings. If you develop loving kindness to the level of jhana, like a Brahma god, then it's equal in all directions to all beings, just like the sun or the moon shines down on the world without choosing where the light falls on the world. So the mind of metta, when practiced to the level of one-pointedness in samadhi, doesn't choose where it goes. It goes in all directions, above, below, behind, in front, and so on, to all beings without exception. When there's a one-pointedness, like a Brahma god with jhana, it's like that. So the mind is in a very pure state. It's not exactly the same as nibbana, but it's certainly a step on the way towards nibbana. Next question. How to cope with addictions to comfort food? Well, this evening we reflected on the 4 basic requisites. It's a typical recitation we do when we chant in the monastery. We reflect on the food we eat, the clothing, the robes we wear, the accommodation, and the medicinal requisites we use to support good health, reasonable health. So even monks who are beggars and penniless still require the basics of food, shelter, clothing, and medicine to get by. But we reflect that, these 4 requisites we use just for the basics to live in the world, to practice the Dhamma. So for basic health, strength, convenience to practice, rather than being an end in themselves, or rather than being a basis for addiction, such as comfort food. So as a monk, you only eat 1 meal a day, and that is alms food, whatever people are willing to share with us, and we're not allowed to go and ask for kinds of foods, according to our preferences. So that's a reflection in itself. Say, as a layperson, you may not have as many rules and practices as a monk. You may eat many meals a day, and you can buy food and store food and cook food and eat snacks and everything you want. So there is, of course, more temptation in the lay life. But the reflection is the same. Why do we eat? We eat to keep this body healthy so we can do more good, practice the Dhamma, rather than as an end in itself. But with all the consumer products available and the kind of material wealth that's available to us as humans in a modern Western society particularly, but nowadays everywhere in the world, I think, there are a lot of snacks and different kinds of food available that can become a substitute. Just give us a little sugar hit or a caffeine hit or a hit of our favorite snack. Maybe it's a monosodium glutamate or something hit, depending on the kind of food you're into. So some people, instant noodles are their thing, and they, like a squirrel, they keep packets of instant noodles hidden away in their room. Even in monasteries people do this, and sometimes in the world people have their little secret store of their comfort food, noodles or chocolate or whatever it is, and then in the middle of the night they bring it out and enjoy a hit. And maybe it does substitute for a mood of depression, sadness, anxiety. It gives a little hit, a little help. But you have to reflect more deeply than that, don't you? Well, why do I eat? And do I really need this? Is it for my health, or is it just I'm addicted to the hit, to the whatever I'm getting from this food? So even monks have this problem. I was once with Ajahn Buddhadasa, and one of his monks told me the story. They're saying, Ajahn Buddhadasa, some people think he doesn't meditate, he just reads the suttas and gives talks and explanations of the suttas but doesn't meditate. And Ajahn Buddhadasa actually did meditate, and he had developed great jhana and psychic powers, but some people didn't believe it or didn't give him credit for that. But occasionally he would actually display his psychic powers from his jhana, and there's one occasion when there was a monk who used to secretly keep a stash of instant noodles in his kuti for when he felt peckish, even though that's breaking the rules. We're not allowed to store food, and we're not allowed to eat after midday. Nevertheless, he was a little bit shameless in that respect, so he did keep his store and nobody knew about it. And so at night, sometimes he would cook himself up a little feast of comfort food, his favourite noodles. And then one day, there was a big group of people came from Bangkok to the monastery to make an offering of Sanghadana to Ajahn Buddhadasa and all the monks, and they brought lots and lots of nice food and other gifts for the monks. And all the monks sat on a stone circle receiving the food, and as they went down the line offering pots of nice food, including noodles, to the different monks, when they reached the monk who had his secret stash of noodles, Lumpur Buddhadasa just said, "Oh, there's no need to offer any food to him, he already ate last night," and embarrassed the monk in front of everyone. So even monks have the problem with addiction to certain kinds of food, comfort food, and in the lay life it's possible as well. You've got to try and establish firmness of mindfulness, firm intent to give up. If you've seen it as a problem, maybe you're seeing it's an unhealthy addiction. And if you work at developing mindfulness, that helps to give you self-control, restraint, awareness to see what's going on. And maybe you can become aware every time the desire for that food arises. You've identified it as a weakness or a problem. Maybe you're craving too much and you're eating too much of a certain kind of food. So you say, no, I'm not going to eat this anymore. So you have to learn to be mindful and catch that desire, identify the desire, observe it arising, but not follow it. So you make a rule for yourself. You might call it a precept. You say, I'm not going to eat that comfort food even when the desire arises, even though I have access to it maybe. I'm not going to go for it. I'll just ignore the desire. And if you keep ignoring something, gradually it comes back less and less, weaker and weaker. But obviously you have to work at it. You have to be patient with your own mind, work at it, practice with it maybe for many weeks, months, even years even, sometimes, until you've got the control, and it will gradually fade from your consciousness. And everyone has had their addictions and obsessions, so other people have managed to overcome them, so if they can, then I can. That's how you can reflect. Ajahn Chah used to say, it's just like a stray cat. If a stray cat keeps coming to your kitchen and you feed it, well, of course it will keep returning. Maybe even it will move in with you and forget its original owner because it's getting a better deal with you. So you have to treat that addiction, the obsession with the comfort food, like a stray cat. You have to be tough out of love for yourself, out of the wish for your own well-being. You have to say no to that thought. And if you keep saying no, like the stray cat comes to the kitchen, doesn't get any food, well, it'll go looking for another kitchen and someone else can feed it. So you can send your cravings on their way and they can go looking at another person's mind or another place, because you're saying no to them, out of compassion for yourself. That's the important thing to see. It's for your own well-being to get control of your mind, give up the addiction. But it will take time, effort. But if you keep saying no, gradually the thought won't arise, and you'll have the happiness of the freedom from that obsession. You have to work it to the point where you get that freedom. Reminds me of the pig that used to be addicted to the leftovers from the monks' food. When the first year we were here in East Warburton, we were staying in a rented house, and the next door neighbour had a pig, young pig, baby pig, female pig that was orange skin with purple dots. It's a very kind of picturesque pig. I've never seen a pig coloured quite like that before. So an orange pig with purple dots lived next door to us and had a pen on the fence line, and it would smell the food as people offered food to the monks every day. It would smell the food and get interested, and so our anagarika would throw the scraps from the monk's meal, which wasn't much, but it was enough and it was tasty, over the fence every day just to feed the pig, and we were very happy that the pig liked the food, the leftover food. But it got so into this food that it actually dug a tunnel under the fence and started actually turning up in our kitchen every day. And would just walk into the kitchen as the monks are sitting there having our meal. Pig walks in to say hello. So we had to say no, we had to stop feeding it because the owner was a bit concerned that this pig kept coming into our house, and it wasn't a good thing for the pig to dig a tunnel and be so uncontrolled. So we had to say no, stop feeding the pig. So sometimes life is like that. You have one kind of kindness, you want to feed that kilesa, the desire for the food, or the pig, this desire for their food. But there's a higher Dhamma here, maybe the Dhamma of what's appropriate in that situation, and if it's comfort food, maybe it's bad for you, it's going to give you health problems, or mentally it makes you weaker, more attached, so you have to say no sometimes, and that's also out of compassion. Next question. Dear Ajahn, I have been living in monasteries for 3 years since I was 19. I have a lot of determination to awaken in this life and practice as a monastic, but I often feel unhappy. I regularly have thoughts about the world and the happiness I might find there. Should I leave so I can experience the suffering of lay life for myself, or try to patiently endure? Please tell me how to find more joy, as I find it hard going. Well, it's a good question and a very typical one for a young monastic. Because if you come into the monastery when you're 19 years old, there's still a lot of curiosity for the world, for pleasures you've had but didn't really satisfy you, or pleasures you think you might get going back to the world. So this is a very natural doubt you might have at that age. Generally speaking, we say, be patient with your doubting mind and your curiosity, and keep cultivating the path. Sila, Samadhi, Panya, reflecting. And reflect on the joy of the path, the good karma you're making, keeping precepts, keeping out of trouble, cultivating kindness and compassion for yourself, for your fellow monastics, for your family, for other people. Cultivating the peace of samadhi by putting effort into your meditation every day. Cultivating the joy of helping others in the monastery, visitors to the monastery and just the general community. Try to find joy in the Dhamma, reading and listening to the Dhamma, reading suttas, listening to explanations of the Dhamma. And you get joy from the Dhamma by getting into it, by reflecting on it, studying it, thinking about it. You have to make that effort until it starts to really stick with you and be a source of joy. So there's a number of sources of joy we get in the monastic life, but it's understandable you have doubt about the kind of pleasure and joy from the lay life. It's a sign that your mind is not yet settled. So you have to work at it, reflect on what you're doing and the good of what you're doing, and try and appreciate that. And like you say, reflect on the suffering of the lay life. Every pleasure you get from the lay life you have to pay for and seek out, and it also comes with a whole baggage collection of pain and suffering as well. To be honest, there's a lot of suffering in relationships, in material wealth and the pursuit of material wealth, the competition with other people, the ups and downs of living in the world, the frustrations of an untrained mind, because if you go back in the world you often have very little time to train in the Dhamma, so you'll have a lot more mental suffering, maybe physical suffering. Reflect on the freedom of being a monastic. You don't have to pay a mortgage and pay bills. You don't have to pursue material wealth and compete with people for material wealth. You don't have to argue with people so much. You don't have to have the burdens of responsibilities and so on. There's a lightness that comes from the monastic life, but you have to cultivate that. It certainly can be done from a young age. Some monks we know, or nuns, they ordain at the age of 10 and never leave the monastery. They may move monasteries, but they never leave the monastic training their whole life. So probably the longest serving monk I knew was Lumpur Supa, who became a novice at the age of 9 and died at the age of 118 and never left the monastery. And he put a lot of effort into his meditation. He lived very simply, got used to being simple, fewness of wishes. So he didn't need a lot of material things, even to the very end of his life. He didn't need a lot of pampering and comfort. He could eat one meal a day, simple accommodation. The last time I met him, he was about 118 years old. He arrived at the monastery I was staying in, came for an event. He was in the back of a ute, sitting on a mattress in the open air. And he drove 5 hours from 4 a.m. in the morning, arrived around 9 or 10 a.m. at the monastery. He'd just been lying or sitting on the back of a ute, 118 years old, and a very well-supported monk. It wasn't that people didn't know him and support him, but he just was quite happy with simplicity. Those are the kind of qualities you have to develop in the monastic life. Simplicity, contentment, mindfulness, and gradually the training brings you more and more joy. And particularly if you develop samadhi, such as Lumpur Supa did, then you get the mind, the happiness of the mind free from hindrances, the refreshing nature of samadhi. So there are definitely plenty of things to enjoy in the monastic life, but you have to cultivate them. You have to work at it, and that's where you need the patience and the effort. So don't be discouraged if you have a few doubts, moods. Just work at it, see if you can keep going. Next question. Dear Lumpur, why do some teachers say that anyone can attain Sotapanna in this life? Should we make an aspiration or determination for this, or would the craving become a blockage? Well, that's something you have to reflect on, isn't it? What is motivating you and the kind of desire you have? Because desire can be categorized as skillful or unskillful. Unskillful is craving, and we can even crave results, like you say, you can crave to be a Sotapanna, crave to attain samadhi or jhana, you can crave to be peaceful, crave to get away from suffering or destroy suffering, you can crave to be somebody, even as a monk or a nun. I want to be a famous teacher, I want to be peaceful, I want this, I want that. Even craving will come into monastic practice. But whether you're a layperson or a monk, you have to identify that and see that where there's craving, it will lead on to suffering. Where a skillful desire is needed, and it's part of the practice that comes from right view, seeing that it's appropriate to train, to develop the path factors, sila, samadhi, mindfulness, wisdom. So, skillful desire comes from wisdom, right view, and we're seeing it as a necessary thing. We have to develop ourselves, we have to cultivate these qualities of the path But we're not focusing on the results, we're just focusing on the good causes and conditions, and you trust that the results will come from that. So the usual kind of simile for this is planting the tree. You plant a tree, you do aim for this tree to grow and be successful, become a big tree, maybe with fruits of some kind, apples for example. But you can't sit there just complaining about the slowness of this tree. You know, when you focus on results, you want the apples, you want a big tree. You'll complain, you'll be upset, dissatisfied with this slow growth tree, pulling at the tree, tugging it, wanting to grow faster and complaining about it. That's just going to be miserable, isn't it? You want to sit down and say, what does this tree need? It needs water, it needs fertilizer, it needs protection from pests and animals, it needs sunlight. So you keep focusing what the tree needs, and you let the growth of the tree take care of itself. You don't have to think about the results. When am I going to get apples? You focus on the causes. That's like the path. The path, magga, is a cause. Phala, the fruit, is the result. But you can't force this result or grab this result. You have to go back to the causes, the skillful causes. So yeah, anyone can develop this path. If you've heard the Dhamma, you understand Dhamma, then practice, yes. Anyone can do it. And yes, you may make a determination to help guide you in your efforts. You know, I aim for Magga Phala Nibbana in this very life, following teachers such as Ajahn Chah. You can do that. And then that helps to set your mind on which direction are you going in life. Are you just going for more worldly success, to be somebody, get wealth, pleasures, or are you going for the path of Sila Samadhi Panya and renouncing craving and attachment? So once you've set your goal, then that helps you to determine every day, are you going in the right direction? Are you increasing your desire, your kilesas, your greed, anger and delusion, or are you reducing it? So yes, you can make a determination. Next question. What does the term anusaya kilesa refer to in Buddhism? Anusaya means, it's translated as latent tendencies, tendencies of mind. Could say your disposition. Kilesa means mental defilement, so mental states rooted in greed, anger and delusion. So anusaya means your latent tendencies, they're sort of asleep, waiting to be aroused in your mental continuum, your consciousness. So when the conditions are right, various kilesas arise, don't they? When you see the thing you like, greed maybe is stimulated. So greed is a latent tendency. You've seen that thing before, enjoyed it before, so when you see it again, greed is just ready to arise up into your mind, into your consciousness. And people's latent tendencies vary, don't they? Their disposition, their karma, of course, partly it's karma, partly it's just habit, habitual karma, partly it's your disposition. So maybe earlier in this life or last life, you are somebody who's built up a lot of greed around whatever, say jewelry. You're a jewelry freak. So it means you have maybe a tendency that wherever jewelry is, as soon as you're in that place or you see it, there's a spark of greed. I like that, I want that. Comes up. You have a latent tendency there towards liking and attraction towards jewelry, for example. But it could be an aversion as well. It could be you have a tendency to, I hate certain sounds. You know, most people hate the sound of fingernails scratching down a blackboard. Even though luckily in these days you never really hear that sound. But if you did, you may hate it. Or it could be that some people hate certain sounds, certain kinds of screechy sounds or loud bangs, whatever. So as long as you haven't heard the sound, nothing is stirred, this latent tendency, this aversion to that kind of sound is just sitting there, nothing's happened, but you have a disposition there. So if the sound comes up, you start experiencing some aversion, maybe, in that case. It's ready, the mind is ready for that defilement to come up when the conditions are right. Someone who doesn't have that disposition maybe doesn't react in the same way. They hear that sound, but they're just normal, neutral. So not everyone's latent tendencies are the same. But it's based on what's gone before. So your mind is primed for that defilement to arise, for the suffering of the defilement to come up. So it's primed for suffering if you haven't yet seen, haven't become aware of that defilement. So how do you defeat latent tendencies? You need to develop mindfulness and investigate to see these qualities are not self. So particularly with sense contact, you have 6 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, touch, and then the mind itself. 6 senses. They bring us sense data, sense contact, information, objects. Some are attractive, some are unattractive to you, depending partly on your latent tendencies, how you react. So if you can establish mindfulness, you can see the eye and the object that is seen, or the ear and the object that is heard, are not self. You are not these objects. Your eyes are not yours. They're just 4 elements come together, make an eye in a human being. Ears are not a self. They're a combination of different component parts. And with ear consciousness or eye consciousness, seeing occurs, hearing occurs, but there's no self in that. So the Buddha encouraged us to abandon latent tendencies, anusaya. We have to develop mindfulness and the reflection on not self. These things are not self. Break them down, analyze them, separate them out, and the latent tendencies will start to fade. Next question. There are a few ongoing challenging tasks at work that I would like to do and do well. I can see I'm getting worried and anxious. Have you got any advice for me? Well, we learn from the challenges and the challenging tasks, so try and see them in a positive light. This is an opportunity to learn, improve my understanding, my effort, my knowledge of whatever it is, what we might call experience. But then we also have our ego, our sense of self, and so at work there's always this problem, anxiety about how other people view us and how well we'll do, and because our system now, our culture is one of competition, competing, comparing. You have to compete to get a job, to keep the job, to get promotion. There's a competition, so it comes out in a lot of sense of self, which leads to anxiety, can't sleep, worried, which often is counterproductive, and obviously it's suffering. So find skillful ways to relax, particularly mindfulness meditations such as mindfulness on the breathing, or any other object such as loving kindness that helps you to calm down, be more mindful, but calm the sense of anxiety before you have to engage with this challenging task, whether it's a meeting with a person or a group, or organizing something, or leading something. Find ways to skillfully calm down. Before you even leave home for work, do it, or before you go to sleep at night, do it. Meditate, calm yourself, and then use some wise reflection, what we call yoniso manasikara. Reflect, you can't be expected to know everything from day one in this job. You're learning. As long as you have the attitude, I'm learning, that's correct. And don't pressure yourself. If you're slow to learn, well, just accept that and keep the the mind open to learning. Other people's opinions, you can receive them. If some people are critical, you have to accept that. Maybe there's some truth to what they say, so don't get upset or angry. Maybe they're helping you by giving you some information or feedback. If their feedback is unfair, unjustified, uncalled for, no need to get angry because you know it's not true. And you reflect wisely on what's going on, what people say, what the truth is, and you're learning. So take the whole thing as a learning experience and try to keep relaxed and at ease while you learn. It's for your benefit to do that job well. You can be happy with yourself. I've put my best effort in, and what other people say and think of you is, it's fairly superficial and often not accurate. You're doing your best to keep your job and progress in your job, of course, but you can only do the best you can with the situation, and part of that, doing the best you can, is keeping cool, keeping calm, learning, trying to rise to the situation and the challenge, but in a way that your mind is in a skillful state. You're making good karma in this situation, not making the negative karma of caught into endless anxiety, anguish, despair. So you need to be mindful, pay attention to what's going on in your mind and recognize when you are getting caught into despair, anxiety, anguish. Let them go. Don't follow those ways of thinking. Last question tonight is in Thai, so maybe I'll just answer it in English first and then in Thai. กราบนมัสการหลวงพ่อค่ะจะทำอย่างไรให้ตัวเราหยุดความคิดเชิง can't read it หยุดความคิดเชิงลบได้ค่ะบางที่รู้ทันความคิดลบแต่หยุดไม่ได้แต่ก็เริ่มคิดโทษคนอื่นก็ทำให้เราเป็นแบบนี้สถานที่ทำงานคนรอบข้างที่เราต้องเจอแค่คนคิดลบก็มีส่วนใช่ไหมคะเราควรเอาตัวออกมาจากที่นั้นใช่ไหมคะขอบคุณค่ะ Well, the question is about how to be mindful of our negative reactions, negative thinking to things, particularly in the case of being in a workplace where other people are very negative, their negative attitudes, negative speech. How much is that impacting on us? Well, yes, it could be impacting on you a lot if you're buying into what they say. As I was saying in the last question, with other people you have to be able to establish mindfulness and reflect wisely on what they're saying. Is it true or not? Is it helpful or not? Is it coming from goodwill and wisdom or not? So if those people are not particularly interested in Dhamma or practicing the Dhamma and they're not mindful of what they say, yes, they can be very negative, so you may have to be on your guard and careful when you're around them, not to buy into their negativity or copy it or believe it too much. The Buddha encouraged us to speak with kindness, speak the truth, speak with wisdom at the right time, the right place, say things that are useful. So if someone else is not doing that, well, you try not to spend too much time with them or give too much value to their words. You may not be able to avoid them if it's in the workplace, but don't give too much importance to what they say. We keep the rules of social engagement. We're polite, friendly, We do our bit, but we don't have to give too much weight to what they say if they're very negative. And unfortunately, in many workplaces, that's how it is, isn't it? People are negative. They let off steam. So if it's really affecting you, try to limit your engagement, perhaps. But if you're with them, just to be careful, be mindful, and try not to repeat or copy what they do. Just because they're doing it doesn't mean to say you have to. And reflect on things. So when you're on your own, reflect, well, what is right or wrong in this situation? What is useful and not? What is conducive to peace of mind and happiness or not? And you don't have to follow them all the time. You can follow the Buddha and follow your own reflections and your own experience, and spend some time with people who speak more positively, more skillfully, people who have sila, people who have faith in the Buddha, maybe, to balance up your life so you're not always with the negative ones. But we have to develop a certain amount of patience in society, because there will be people with many different values and standards around us, and some do speak very negatively, and we just have to endure that while we're with them. ก็ตอบเป็นภาษาไทยเนาะเราคบคนที่ทำงานมีคนพูดในแง่ลบเยอะก็เป็นธรรมดาให้ตั้งสติให้ดีให้มีสติแล้วก็พิจารณาสิ่งที่เขาพูดมีประโยชน์ไหมถ้าไม่มีประโยชน์เราก็ไม่ต้องทำตามไม่ต้องไปสนใจมากเกินไปรักษามารยาทเราก็มีเมตตาต่อทุกคนแต่ถ้าเขาไม่ระวังชอบพูดใส่ร้ายคนอื่นนินทาลับหลังคนอื่นพูดทุกสิ่งทุกอย่างในแง่ลบตลอดให้เราระวังมีสติแล้วก็ถ้าไม่จำเป็นเราก็ไม่ต้องเข้าไปพบคุยกับเขาก็ได้แต่ถ้าจำเป็นเราต้องอยู่กับเขาเราก็ฟังเขาก็ไม่ต้องไปใส่ใจมากเราก็ถ้าสิ่งที่เขาพูดไม่จริงให้รู้จักว่ามันไม่จริงแต่เราเองไม่ต้องไปพูดอย่างนั้นแล้วก็กลับมาดูจิตใจตัวเองเราเองคิดในแง่ร้ายในแง่ลบไหมมันทำให้เราทุกข์หรือสุขไหมแล้วบางครั้งเราก็คบหาสมาคมกับคนที่พูดดีคนที่มีศีลคนที่พูดในแง่บวกบ้างแล้วก็เราเองก็พยายามพูดในสิ่งที่เป็นประโยชน์มีเมตตามีสติมีเมตตาแล้วก็พูดในสิ่งที่เป็นความจริงมีประโยชน์ถ้าเราจับได้ว่าคนอื่นพูดในแง่ร้ายในแง่ลบก็ระวังไว้เราจะได้ไม่ต้องติดเชื้อ จากเขาก็ระวังการปฏิบัติเป็นอย่างนี้เราต้องอดทนมีสติมีความเพียรมากๆเพราะว่าสังคมรอบข้างเราบางคนมีศีลบางคนไม่มีศีลให้เราปฏิบัติของเราไปพึ่งตัวเองส่วนคนอื่นเราก็อาจจะสงสารเขาถ้าเขาพูดในแง่ลบตลอดสงสารเขาเพราะว่าเขาคงจะมีความทุกข์แต่ถ้าเราแก้เขาไม่ได้แก้ไขเขาไม่ได้เราก็ต้องปล่อยวางวางใจเป็นกลางเป็นกรรมของเขาน่าสงสารแต่อาจจะไม่ใช่หน้าที่เราที่จะไปแก้ไขเขาเราก็ดูแลตัวเองเป็นอันดับแรกนะ So that's the end of the Q&A session tonight, quite long. So I'll leave it there and we can talk again next time.